Welcome to another special edition of In the Labs with Todd. When I was younger, we had a proper mantle over top of our fireplace, and every year my mom and dad would decorate it differently. Maybe one year it'd be dad's train set, the other year maybe mom's teddy bears. Well, I thought it'd be kind of nice if we could make something for our mantle this year. And so here it is. Let me take you into software and show you all the different files that you need to create this. Let's go ahead and have a look at the files that we're going to give you for this project. So if I go ahead and load up VCarve Desktop, and we're going to open up an existing file. There are two CRV files here, so these are going to be compatible with VCarve Desktop Pro and Aspire. You'll see there's one here called 01 Mantle Decoration Base and 02 Mantle Decoration Reindeer. Now, these are the order that I actually made or designed the files in, but we're going to review them in reverse order because it'll make more sense for you in the end. So let's go ahead and load up the Reindeer. And as always, you'll be presented with the notes. Now make sure that you read and understand these and adjust the tooling so it's safe and appropriate for your job setup. I'm just going to click OK. Let's have a look at this particular job setup. It's a single-sided job. The width and the height of the material is 13 by 9 and the thickness is 0.78. Now keep that in mind because this is going to be important on where I position my model inside of my material so I get the right thickness of tab that I need at the bottom to insert into my base. I'm going to zero off my material surface. Now this material is not flat, so I thought that if I actually did that from the top, I'd end up getting a pretty uniform thickness across everything. I'm going to zero, or my datum, is going to be set to the center. Now this is the same as the base, and I wanted to keep both datum positions the same so that I wouldn't get confused in going from the bottom left to a center and make a mistake. So both of these are set up this way on purpose, and it'll make more sense in a minute when we take a look at the actual base. We're going to use a very high resolution because we're using some 3D content, and Canadian Maple will be our material, and I can just go ahead and click OK. If we have a look at our layers manager, there are two different layers. There's one that's called Reindeer and one that's called Reindeer plus tab. If I hide the Reindeer plus tab, you'll see that the vectors that are on this particular layer are just outlines of the two 3D models that we have in here. So we can take a look at those. There they are right there. And the actual Reindeer plus tab is there's a little extra bit at the bottom. I created a rectangle that it was exactly the height of the depth that I needed for the tab in the top of my base. Okay, so that would fit in there. And we're going to use the position of like I mentioned a minute ago, the position of our model and our material to figure out how thick that should be in the end. Okay, so let's have a look at our tooling, retile our views. There are three different tool paths, but we need to take a look at our material setup because that's where all the magic is going to happen for this particular one. Let's go ahead and look at that. Our material thickness is 0.78, like I mentioned before. We're going to set up with our datum is going to be in the center. We're going to zero off our material surface, but we're going to make sure that we position our model so that there's a gap below those models of 1/4 inch. This is the thickness of the tab that I need or that I want to have to fit inside of the pocket. Okay, so that's why there's some extra material at the top and extra material at the bottom. And you'll see if you look at the actual material here in our 3D view that it's actually sitting in the center like it should be. Okay, the rest of these numbers are just set up for my machine, so make sure they're safe and appropriate for yours. I'm going to click OK. I'm not going to recalculate the tooling right now because we're going to look at these and recalculate it as we go. First of all, we'll look at our roughing tool path. Okay, we're going to use a 1/4 inch end mill for that. I want something big and beefy that I could just go through and whip through that really quick. We're going to use these vectors as our actual, to isolate our tooling with. We're going to offset, we're going to do a boundary offset of 1/4 inch. So we're going to cut out that outside of that, the diameter of my tool. Leave a little bit of material behind. We're going to use the Z-level roughing strategy, and we rename that, and we can calculate that. And we'll have a look at that. Of course, if it's not what you think you want to see, then you can go back and change that. But this is exactly what I wanted to see. It looks really good to me. So let's move on to the finish. We're going to use a 1/8 inch ball nose end mill. I figured that was going to be a good compromise between a 1/4 inch ball nose and a 1/16. And still get nice detail for these nice shapes that I've modeled for these reindeer. Now I didn't mention that I actually modeled these reindeer in Aspire and then brought them into VCarve using the magic of some Vectric software. And the thing with that is that I've actually designed these so that I could accommodate these 1/8 inch end mills, the ball nose end mill and the cutout end mill that we're going to use, so I get a nice edge to them. Okay. So the boundary offset is a 1/4 inch. That is there because I want to make sure that I overcut outside of my model for two reasons. One, I don't want any cusping on the edge of my 3D model. And also I want to leave enough room for my next tool to fit in there because it's a little bit different than what I've used in the past. And I'll explain that in a minute. We'll use offset strategy. There's no step over retract, and we can just go ahead and calculate that. I name all my tool paths essentially so I know what tool I have or going to be using. So let's preview that visible tool path, and you'll see that all looks great. And there is a little bit of a step there. You see that? And that was by design. That's so that I can fit in this interesting 1/8 inch end mill that I have that only has a 1/2 inch cut depth on it. Okay, so my material is 0.78 of an inch thick, so I can't actually plunge all the way down through or end up breaking my bit because the cutting surface doesn't go up to that 1/4 inch shank. So to accommodate for that, what I've decided is that my start depth of my profile cut is going to be the Z thickness of my material minus a 1/4 inch. Okay, that'll make sure that I touch down at the 1/4 inch at the base of my 3D content or my 3D models, and I'm only going to cut down a 1/4 inch. Okay, so I've accommodated for that here for all of that different tool geometry that I need to worry about. I'm going to cut outside of that line. We're going to use some tabs that I've put in there in strategic locations where I thought that the parts might be a little weak. And we can go ahead now and preview that, or calculate that and preview that, and you'll see what we have in the end. And that looks pretty good in the end. I'm really happy with that. But again, all of these little turns and radiuses in here have been modeled for a 1/8 inch diameter tool to fit in there nice. Okay, now let's go ahead and have a look at the next file. Okay, so here we go. We're going to take a look at the 01-mantle decoration base. Now this is an interesting file because what I've actually do is I've combined two sets of tool paths in here, or two tool paths in here, but you need to index your material in between each tool path, okay? And I'll explain that in just one moment. Again, we'll have these notes. Make sure you read and understand them and adjust the tooling to be safe and appropriate for your machine. We'll click OK. Let's have a look at our model job setup. So here we have a single-sided job. The width and the height of this are important, and I'll show you in a minute. I've drawn a box on two different layers, and they indicate the actual size or the faces of the block of material that I'm going to be using. And one is slightly bigger than the other because the top face is wider, but this size job accommodates both of those pieces of material, or both of those faces of the material. The thickness doesn't really matter because I'm actually going to be zeroing off the surface of my material. I'm only going down a defined depth which will never reach this. So this is the thickness from one of the faces, but I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to be zeroing off my material surface. It's an uneven surface, so I'm just going to make a guess in the center. And then I'm going to go ahead and use a standard modeling resolution because it's only V-carving and pocketing that I'm using here. And we can just go OK. So let's have a look at our actual layers. We have a face layer and a top layer. If I turn them both on, you'll see that there's a green box. That indicates the size of the top of my block that I'm going to be using. The brown indicates the face. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the V-carving first, take my material off my machine, rotate it, stick it back down on my machine again, and do the other side, okay? And that way, there's both in one file. It makes it a little bit easier for me to keep track of everything. Okay, let's go ahead and hide the top for a second. So here we have this box here. If I press T on my keyboard, that's the actual shape of the material that I have. It's 15.75 by 1.9375. The height of that, okay, that's the face of it, which is great. And simply, we're just going to be adding some V-carving in here. So I've got two tool paths. On the face layer, this is the face tool path. I'm going to be running on that. If we go ahead and have a look at that, it's just a 60-degree V-bit, no big deal. I'm starting a little bit deeper because I know that it's not flat, so I wanted to make sure I had nicely shaped lettering in the end. And we're just going to go ahead and name that, and we can calculate that, and we'll preview our visible tool path. Now, when I actually go to cut this, I'm going to cut this tool path, then I'll go ahead and take the material off the machine, rotate it 90 degrees, and plunk it back down on the machine again so I can go ahead and cut this next one. If we close this down and we reset our preview, go to our 2D view and have a look at our top. These are the two pockets for the reindeer that are going to sit in there. I've actually put in some dog bone fillets in there. That makes it a bit easier for my tool to get in there. It's a 1/4 inch end mill I'm going to be using, and I'll cut that out nice and clean. So let's have a look at that. We're going to do a cut depth of a 1/2 inch, which is the height, that's the height of that box that I added onto the bottom of the reindeer outline for my tabs that I made on my reindeer. We're going to do offset tooling, and we're going to give a little bit of a pocket allowance so it makes that pocket a little bit bigger so my reindeer will fit in there, but fit in there so it's nice and snug. And we're going to go ahead and calculate that, and we can preview that visible toolpath. And there we have it, sitting on top of our material. Let's go into the labs now and see how these cut, and I'll talk a little bit more about how this tooling is all going to work out. We're going to start out by using double-sided tape to position the reclaimed piece of wood I was going to use for the base, and you'll see that I sandwiched it between 2 pieces of 3/4 inch pine there, just so it wouldn't fall over, give it a little extra support. Threw in that V-bit and then cut out the Merry Christmas text. Now I had actually found the center of the top of that and started from there. That way I could make sure that it was going to be in the center of the piece of wood, because that wood is not straight at all. Took that off and put down the piece of white oak that I was going to use for the reindeer, and then swapped in that 1/4 inch end mill and started the roughing passes. Now typically I wouldn't have cut that first tool path first. I would have actually cut the reindeer first, but I was nervous about that initial setup, so I wanted to get that out of the way. Here we go, the roughing passes are finished, and we're going to put in that 1/8 inch ball nose end mill to do the finishing. I was really happy with the surface finish on those reindeer. They look really great. When I put it in that 1/8 inch end mill, and you would have noticed the geometry for that. Again, I only had a 1/2 inch of cutting surface on that, so it's good that I worked in all the clearances I need into my tooling. And those cut out really good. Now the material wasn't quite flat, so there was a bit of a onion skin I had to remove with my knife, and that took a little bit of time, but I needed to cut out one of those reindeer so I could test fit it into the next cut. So here I am putting back on that piece of reclaimed wood, double-sided taped it down, and cut the pockets for the reindeer. And I had one of those reindeer all sanded up, and I could fit that in there to make sure it fit okay. And look at that, Bob's your uncle, fits perfect. Did a lot more sanding to get rid of that little bit of onion skin that I had left behind on the back of all the parts. Put on a coat of sand and sealer on the base, and that really made the surface pop a little bit, so it made the text look a little bit better. Used a nice dark stain on the reindeer, and that turned out really nice on the white oak. The parts that were hard to get to with the rag, I used a paintbrush to get into. And there's the final parts. I decided to glue them in. Now, you probably wouldn't need to do this step if you were going to take this apart every Christmas and pack it up. I thought it'd be nice to glue it all together, but I guess in hindsight I could have just left those unglued. Really quite happy with everything when it was all said and done.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. It was a lot of fun to make, and actually it was really quite fast to cut, and I really liked using the reclaimed wood for the base. I think it looks really nice in the end. Anyway, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do. And if you want to make your own, just head over to your V&Co account and download the free project so you can cut it on your own CNC machine for this Christmas. Anyway, thanks a lot, be safe, and I'll see you next time.